Now, gardening gives us benefits in 4 key areas of our lives. The first is exercise. The second is in terms of relaxation. Then there's physical and mental health. And finally, there's the opportunity for optimal nutrition when you grow at least part of your own fruits, veggies, and herbs. Now, in terms of exercise, this gorgeous lady visited me on her 91st birthday, and she lives up in the Barossa, and she's on an acre, right? Now, you know, part of gardening is when you have a garden or you have access to a garden. So even if you're living somewhere where you haven't got a garden, there are fabulous gardens that you can get involved with, whether it's the Fern Avenue Community Garden, whether it's Carrickhill, whether it's Beaumont House, whether it's the Waite Arboretum. So there are all these gardens we can sort of share, but gardening works all your major muscle groups. And I know that because yesterday I actually had most of the day in the garden, and today I can feel it in all my major muscle groups. Who knows that? At the end of the day, you can certainly tell you've done a good day in the garden. They actually tell me that we could swap a 45-minute session in the garden. So if we put 45 minutes into the garden and we work well, it's equivalent to a 30-minute gym session. And you think about that. I'm not particularly keen on a gym. I do Pilates and I do other stuff like that, but you know, the great thing about a garden is you don't need to wear active wear, right? Because you none of that pressure trying to look good in active wear. And when you have a garden or access to a garden, you have your own 24/7 gym with no membership fees, which is really important too. And the other thing is, you know, people talk about how important exercise is for us in terms of triggering endorphins. You know, during this whole COVID thing, it's been really important that people get out and exercise. Well, gardening is a great low-impact exercise, and it does trigger the endorphins just the same as walking or running does. Now, in terms of relaxation, relaxation during this last 6 months has been more important than ever because we've been in this crazy, stressful time where there's so much uncertainty and angst. And one of the things that I've read that will come out of this time, and it came out of Melbourne, is that they're expecting that there will be a decrease in people living in high-density apartment buildings as people move to find, you know, even if they have to move out of town a bit, and they move to find a property that's got a garden, right? Because people that have been in lockdown in an apartment, you know, without anywhere to go, are measuring higher stress levels than those that have a garden. There's a whole lot of gardeners I know, even all my friends in Victoria, who are going, I don't know where we'd be if it wasn't for our garden. Our garden is our sanctuary. You know, if you're feeling stressed, just to go outside and you look at nature, right? And you look at whether it's a bee buzzing or whether it's, you know, you listen to the bird song, you know, all of those things to find a place or a way we can manage our stress in these crazy times is more important than ever. And the reality is that gardening gives us both active and passive ways to manage our stress. Passive is just being outside in the beauty of nature. Active is when you get out your pair of secateurs, right, and you take out your frustration on something that needs pruning. Who knows the therapeutic value of pruning, right? You know, that's a whole different story. So the reality is that if you, it doesn't matter whether it's COVID, whether you're going through personal challenges, whether you're going through health challenges, even if you visualise yourself now at the end of a tough day, you know, whether it was that you got caught in traffic or at the moment anyone driving up and down the southeastern freeway can be stressed by the time they get to the toll gate because you never know if you need a half an hour or an hour. But, you know, if you imagine yourself at the end of a tough day and then you visualise yourself in a beautiful garden. Now, even as I say that, I can feel my shoulders start to drop, right, as I'm visualising myself in a beautiful garden. And if you take a deep breath in that space, visualising yourself in a beautiful garden, your heart rate will slow down. So, you know, we shouldn't underestimate how important being aware of beauty around us. And even when we can't physically garden, just being in nature is really important. Now there's a whole lot of different therapies like forest bathing, which you may have heard of or you may not. And this week we've actually got, it's actually the Nature Festival, and I don't know if you know about this, but there's events going on all around South Australia talking about how important nature is. On Wednesday night, I'm hosting an event with 5 amazing scientists and explorers, Tim Jarvis, Chris Daniels, and other people, and that will be a virtual event, and that's put on by the museum, and it's all about, helping us connect with the beauty of nature. Anyway, so this quote from Audrey Hepburn, which is beautiful, says, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." And Peter Cundall would often talk about the fact that in times of world uncertainty, whether there's wars going on or COVID, the simple act of planting a seed is life affirming, because you plant a seed knowing that there's a season, there's a pattern, this too shall pass. Now, in terms of physical health benefits, they're numerous. And while I might make a bit light of this, if you're interested in reading these studies, please go onto my website, and there's all sorts of links to all these studies. But they've shown that the benefits range from reduced blood pressure, improved medical outcomes, even faster recovery rates. And one of the things that I find fascinating is they've done a lot of studies around hospital stay and green space. So if you go to hospital and you're going to be in hospital for more than one night, I would tell you to be a cantankerous patient and fight for a room with a view, right? Now, you've got 2 options. I mean a green view, as opposed to the best of brick wall and the air conditioning unit. Now, more and more, hospitals and places like that are being designed so you've got a green view. And the reason why is they've actually worked out that patients with a green view require less pain medication. Right? So this is scientifically proven. So if you're a gardener, you go, well, I know gardening's good for you. But if you're not a gardener now, they're coming up with all these scientific studies showing why we should get into gardening. And, in terms of vitamin D, who's heard that Australians have got a vitamin D deficiency? Is a bit of an epidemic in Australia. And they're saying it's because we're too good at slip, slop, slap. Well, that's a bit contentious. Another thing is that because our bodies manufacture vitamin D, if we don't have the full gamut of nutrients in our bodies, we can't actually manufacture the vitamin D. And there's a whole lot of food out there that looks like food, but it's not actually nutrient dense. In terms of those cricket balls they sell in the supermarkets, and they call them tomatoes. Have you seen those? Or all that sort of thing. The things that you could, if they accidentally fall off the rack, you could kick them around a couple of times, pick them up, put them back on the shelf, and they wouldn't even have a blemish on them. So one of the things is that when you have access to food that you grow yourself, you've got access to optimal nutrition, and the health benefits of that are far-ranging too. Now this next one is vitamin N. Who's heard of vitamin N? Okay, a few years ago, I got asked to be the opening speaker at a gerontology conference. Who knows what gerontology is? I didn't, right? I'm a pretty basic person. I had to Google it, right? It means aging, right? Now, this was not a conference for more mature people. It was for the people that run the facilities that look after more mature people. And so it was a conference full of suits. Okay, now I don't know why they got me to be the opening speaker, but one of the horticultural therapists in the room who works in recovery and aged care said that we think you'd be fun. So anyway, I'm doing this talk and everyone's very serious. It's in a Schmidt conference room and I'm talking about the benefits of vitamin D and vitamin N. And, who's heard of vitamin N? And they're all looking perplexed and they're taking notes, right? And in the end, I said, well, I made it up. It's vitamin nature, right? And they look really ticked. But the interesting thing is since then, there's actually a book that's come out called Vitamin N, and it's written by a world authority on nature play and being outside. And they talk about the fact that if you spend time outside, you've got increased memory, cognition, all sorts of things, meaning that whether you're a child in school, right, and you need to, when you have a lunchtime, don't sit there on a device, get outside and interact with nature, or whether you're an adult in a working situation, when it comes lunchtime, you're far better to go to the park and eat your lunch than sit in the lunchroom. So vitamin N is really important. Now, another thing, you've got to get your hands in the dirt, okay? Who likes getting their hands in the dirt? Some people don't. It's a sensory thing. But one of the things over the years is I used to be very embarrassed because I've got gardener's hands, right? And every now and again the photographer will be doing a close-up shot of something in my hand and they'll comment on it and, you want to do that. But what they've actually shown is that there is a naturally occurring soil bacterium called Mycobacterium vaccae that when you ingest it, it triggers serotonin release in your brain. Now, serotonin is your happy pill. And the amazing thing about serotonin is that if you have access to a garden and you can get your hands in the soil, you can self-medicate and you can't overdose. So if you know a gardener, or maybe you've said this yourself, half the time they say, oh, it's been a tough week. I just need to go home and get my hands in the soil. Who's ever heard someone say that? So it's now scientifically proven that they're using it to treat cancer patients in the UK, right? They're actually saying it's really important. Now, in this time of COVID, when we've become super cleany, it's an interesting thing to be talking about getting dirty and not being clean, but there's good dirt and there's bad dirt. I'm talking about good veggie garden dirt. I'm not talking about contaminated dirt and, it's about needing to connect with the real soil. Now, another thing that's quite an interesting one, certainly not on a day like today, is walking barefoot. Who's a barefoot babe? Who loves to be barefoot on the lawn when you can? Right? Do you know now there's a whole therapy called earthing? Now, there's some people that are sceptical about it, but if we lived in the UK or, say, Northern Europe, where you can't be barefoot on the ground, you can buy an earthing mat, okay? You can actually get a mat that goes under your mattress, or you can have it under your desk, and you're meant to have 20 minutes a day in contact with that earthing mat. And what happens is there's an electron transfer that supports your adrenal health. And the benefits are huge, ranging from reduced stress to better sleeping. And apparently, it can actually reduce or eliminate snoring. Now, I know a whole lot of women that might be kicking their husbands out, right? But I'd say that, probably not this time of year. It's a bit cold to be barefoot outside. But that's a new thing. Now, in terms of mental health, there's a hypothesis that Richard Louv, that man that wrote the book Vitamin N, came up with, and it's called the Biophilia Hypothesis. And basically what it says is, as human beings, even though we may have neglected it, we have an inherent need to interact with the natural world. And when we ignore that need, there are dire physical, mental and emotional challenges. So connecting with the garden is really important. And, all sorts of studies about the benefits to our mental health. And basically gardening can help us manage stress before it becomes a problem. But if we do have long-term stress and we do end up with mental health issues, gardening can also help there too. And the Norwegian study took patients with moderate to severe depression, got them to do a 3-month horticultural course, and at the end of that course, all patients experienced reduced symptoms. So gardening is wonderful for us at all times in our life, but particularly at times when there's stress. So Beyond Blue did this study based in Adelaide where they looked at people and where they lived. And basically the outcome is that those that live in neighbourhoods they perceive as very green. Now we should underline perceive, because as a gardener, what I perceive as very green is very different to someone who's not a gardener, okay? So I would need a lot more green in my environment to perceive it as very green. But people that perceive that they live in a neighbourhood that's very green have 1.6 times greater odds of physical and mental health, right? Which is huge if you think about that. So one of the things is, when we're thinking about, say, young ones in your life, they might be buying their first home. There might be the exciting process of choosing where they're going to live, their first home, where are they going to buy? Instead of saying to them, what are the shops like? Is it good public transport or whatever? I would actually suggest that the question we should be asking them is, do you think it's very green? Okay? Because if they do, they've almost got double the chance of a better life than if it's not. So it's really important to understand that, and that was by Beyond Blue. the reality is 25% of kids are being diagnosed as being overweight or obese, and 14%, although the figure they say to me, it's actually closer to 18% are being diagnosed with mental illness. There's a really simple thing, and this is what Nature Play has been pushing for the last 4 or 5 years, and that is to connect kids with nature. Less screen time and more green time. Who knows that kids spend, all their time in front of devices? Who knows that a whole lot of adults spend all their time in front of devices too? So it's really important that we understand kids are better if they're outside. There's actually been some research in Canada too that 1.5 hours of outside quality time. So outside time, quality time means just being. It doesn't mean doing sport. It doesn't mean doing a prescribed activity. It means just being outside. Who remembers as a child just being, Mum probably kicked you out of the house and said, don't come back till the street lights come on, or don't come back till it gets dark. Who remembers a childhood like that? You made mud pies, right? You climbed trees. Only 1 in 4 Australian kids has ever climbed a tree. Isn't that scary? We put them in front of a steering wheel at 16, but they mightn't have the gross or fine motor skills. So it's really important. So with this study with kids with ADHD, they found that 1.5 hours of quality outdoor time is equivalent to a daily Ritalin dose, which is the thing that they use to calm them down. Sometimes we've made things so high-tech that we've actually forgotten common sense. Who has a veggie patch that you adore? Okay, yeah. If you want the best chance of beautiful produce, not only will it last longer, not only will it be fresher, you know what's gone into it, growing your own is the key. And whether it's because you're concerned about, what goes into food, or you just want something to do, one of the amazing things about COVID is the interest in growing your own produce. It actually stemmed because people were concerned about food security. Now, I'm told by the experts that Australia was never in doubt for food security, but for a while there, vegetable seeds were like toilet paper, right? And all the people that would normally buy their veggies and plant their veggies couldn't actually get what they wanted. And my concern at the initial start of COVID was that people weren't getting the right information and they were getting caught up in the panic. And so I worked with my local community centre to do some very basic gardening videos on how to grow veggies, get your soil right, find the right position, and what to grow when. So, I think we should all have a go at growing things, even if it's just a few herbs on a windowsill, because not only does it taste good and is it fresher, but it's really good for you. Okay, now, this time last year, I was up in Toowoomba judging the Toowoomba Chronicle Garden Competition. And we did something like, I can't remember, but it was big. It was something like 50 or 60 gardens in 5 days. But as part of that, I got to meet these amazing inspirational gardeners. Now here we've got Ruby Brunner on the left, and we've got Kevin and Lola Steinmuller. And they are both in their own large gardens and, with beauty, and still get out there and potter around. Now, in some cases, they've got their grandies that come in. They've decided to stay in their own home and simplify their gardens and make them more user-friendly, I should say. So, in many cases, people look at putting in raised beds. If your back is giving you curry, or, simple things like making your beds raised works really well. Wide accessible paths. Now, the path on the left was beautiful. The lady that owned this garden here, her name escapes me right at this moment, she was in her 80s, right? And, I wouldn't say that was necessarily wide or accessible, but she was still getting up and down there, and the great thing about meeting elderly gardeners and seeing how they do things, she did install the handrail, right? And she did use the handrail. I've been involved with horticultural therapy, which is where they work with people that have not only in aged care, but often people that have suffered injuries and have gone through Hampstead. And this is a mate of mine called Wayne Frant. Wayne is on 75 acres up at Murray Bridge, right? And he's younger than me, I presume, and he was involved in an accident and became a paraplegic. And, you know, he is the best ambassador for why we should garden. Gardening saved his life. He thought life was over, and someone out at Hampstead took the time to show him that he could still garden. And his veggie garden, you know, the soil in his veggie garden, I had soil envy. Anyone that grows things will know that, you know, if you've got beautiful soil, and he's got a few tools to make things easier. So he's got one of those things he puts on his drill and it works the soil over. And after seeing that, I thought I need to get one of those too. So, you know, it's all about making gardening easier and injury prevention, right? So a lot of people are, every now and again, a radio talkback person will try and commandeer commentary to get it to how dangerous gardening is, right? I remember someone years ago got me on, wanted to talk about gardening, and the next thing he's talking about spiders and snakes, and he's wanting to say how, you know, dangerous gardening is because he wasn't a gardener. But now the reality is that, you know, when we get in a car, that's probably one of the most risky things we can do. You know, if we have the right equipment, we can garden successfully. You know, it'll keep us younger, it'll keep our brain working, you know, it keeps us mentally active, and it puts a smile on our face. So on that note, I'm going to finish off.